One time a Scottish king died and then his heart got so pissed it went on a crusade to the Holy Land. Let me explain. In 1329, Scottish King David the Bruce kicked the bucket. Now, before we get into the whole heart that went on crusade thing, let's just take a moment to appreciate what a weird, grim, and heroic tale this is. A king going on crusade is already pretty out there, but a dead king? Come on. Anyway, back to the story. Robert the Bruce was a warrior king, the kind of guy who led his people to victory over the English at the Battle of Bannockburn and generally tried to keep Scotland from becoming an English vassal. But he was also a religious man, at least by medieval standards. He prayed a lot, kept holy relics around, and even had a chaplain ride with him everywhere just to make sure he didn't accidentally commit mortal sins. And that last one was probably a good call because Robert was hot-headed, to say the least. So when he died in 1329, his nobility councillors were a little worried about what his soul might be doing after death. You see, Robert was known for hating England and its king, Edward III, perhaps a little too much. So what if his undying hatred manifested itself after death and sent his body to hell instead of heaven? To avoid any chance of that happening, they decided to do something extreme, send his heart on crusade. Now, whether or not Robert would have wanted that is highly debatable. We don't have any record of him saying, hey, if I die, throw my ticker in a sack, get some camels and send me on my way. But what we do know is that his councillors were pretty determined to get this thing done. His embalmed heart was sewn up in a linen cloth, placed in a silver shrine, and then set off on its very own quest to the Holy Land. First stop, London, where it was tossed into the River Thames. Next, Paris, where it took a little swim in the Seine. Then it made its way down to the Mediterranean, where ships were waiting to take it to the Holy Land. And along the way, it picked up some admirers. In Marseille, a bunch of French nobles asked for the heart so they could venerate it. Basically be like, oh cool relic, totally love it. But they didn't want to take the whole body, just the heart. And given that the rest of Robert the Bruce's corpse was still hanging out in a church in northern France, this wasn't a problem. From there, the heart traveled to Genoa, where a bunch of Italian nobles got wind of the whole thing and demanded to see it before it was shipped off to Scotland. But they weren't going to get their hands on it because it was now under the protection of the Knights Templar, a holy order founded in 1118 to help pilgrims travel safely to the Holy Land. They took one look at this floating bag of royal heart and said, okay, this is too weird even for us, and they sailed off with it. When the Templars showed up in Jaffa though, the Crusader Kingdom of Jerusalem wasn't too happy to see them. Turns out they didn't actually want Robert's heart. In fact, they didn't want any part of him. And that's because by the time his heart got there, the kingdom had fallen to the Mamluk Sultanate in 1291. Now this isn't a kids show, so let me just summarize the next 30 years or so of fighting between Christians and Muslims in the Holy Land. Basically, different groups of European Christians tried and failed to take back Jerusalem several times. By the 1330s, most European powers had given up on the idea of ever taking Jerusalem back except for England and Scotland. But while Edward III was busy trying to conquer everything in Europe, Scotland was stuck fighting off the English themselves. So there was no way Robert the Bruce's heart was gone. Nah, get the last laugh and seize Jerusalem. It just wasn't gonna happen. Instead, the Templars kept the heart in their headquarters at the Tower of London until 1368 when they finally gave up and dissolved as an order. At that point, Robert the Bruce's heart was transferred to a church in England where it stayed for another 200 years until it was rediscovered. In 1545, during renovations, a local priest looked inside the box and found not a heart but a bunch of bones. And suddenly everyone was like, oh yeah, Robert the Bruce's heart. Right, yeah, that weird thing we did. From there, the bones were sent to a monastery in Scotland and then to Scone Abbey, where they became a major relic of Scottish national identity. Today, they are on display at the Mercat Cross in Edinburgh, and thousands of people come to see them every year. As for the original plan to send the heart to the Holy Land, well, that didn't exactly work out. But the Scottish and English have since become pretty friendly, which makes Robert the Bruce's accidental anti-crusade all the more ironic. And that's why Robert the Bruce's heart got so pissed it went on crusade. Wait, that's not right. Never mind. So a couple centuries ago, before Scotland and England were chummy like they are today, a Scottish monk named John of Fordun wrote this. The heart of the most noble King Robert was sent to the Holy Land for the salvation of the king's soul. But this pious and noble enterprise did not prosper through the perils of the sea and the unruliness of men, so much so that the vessel in which the sacred relics were being carried was captured by pirates and the heart was lost to this day. Now, the legend says that Robert the Bruce's heart ended up in the hands of the Ottoman Empire. From there, it sat in a mosque in Bursa for years, maybe even centuries. And in 1984, it came within a hair of ending up in the British Museum. See, in the 19th century, British consul in Turkey, Austen Henry, and Lord Curzon wanted to buy the heart and stick it in the British Museum. That didn't happen. But in 1984, George Fioglu, a Turkish businessman, heard about a purportedly Scottish heart sitting in a mosque. He bought it and sent it to Edinburgh Castle, where it was welcomed with a 19-gun salute. Now, while many people in Scotland were excited to have Robert the Bruce's heart back, historians weren't so sure it actually was his heart. Like, first of all, how does a heart survive in a mosque for centuries? Second of all, how does it end up in a Turkish museum? And third of all, why do we believe John of Fordingen over, literally anyone else? As it turns out, John of Fordingen wrote that exact story down about 300 years after the heart was supposed to have been lost at sea, and there are no contemporary accounts of Robert the Bruce's heart traveling to the Holy Land or being captured by pirates. However, there is a letter written by Sir John Mandeville in 1367, which says that Robert the Bruce's heart was stolen from the Tower of London by Sir James Douglas, one of Robert's counsellors. And that's important because there was a guy named James Douglas who traveled to the Middle East in the 1330s and wrote stories about what he saw there. So maybe the two are related. Just maybe. But here's the real kicker. In 1986, it turned out that Geoffrey's heart was actually a fake. Turns out it belonged to someone else entirely. And not only that, but it hadn't even been embalmed, meaning it would never have survived intact for centuries. So as far as we can tell, Robert the Bruce's heart is still sitting in that church in France, wherever that is. Thank you for watching.